another episode of Behind the Veil, where we delve into realms of high strangeness and exploring phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality. I'm your host, Mike Hughes.
And I'm your co-host, Christian Julian.
Today, we're delving into the mysterious world of Bigfoot with Jim Myers, a seasoned researcher and owner and operator of Sasquatch Outpost in Bailey, Colorado. Join us as we unravel the high strangeness aspects surrounding the elusive Bigfoot phenomenon and gain unique insights from Jim's extensive experience in the field. Get ready for a riveting conversation about one of the world's most mysterious creatures in folklore as we go behind the veil with Jim Myers. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Yeah,
Definitely glad to have you, my friend. And so we're going to be diving into the high strangeness aspects of Bigfoot, and I'm definitely on board with that. But first off, let's get right into it. Let's talk about your journey into Bigfoot and how that all started.
Well, I've been a Bigfoot believer, I'd say, for most of my life. Although I grew up overseas, I grew up in Africa. There wasn't a lot I could do in researching Sasquatch back in those days. And most of the time that I was living internationally, there was no internet. I'm dating myself here. But when we moved back to the States and to Colorado, I started pursuing my interests. And if I look back, what really got me going was watching the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek when I was 10 years old.
Yeah, it's a good one.
72. It was rated G at the time. It was a scary movie as a kid. And, there was this scene where the thing busts its arm through the trailer window, and there's stuff like that. But it was scary, but it got me interested in wondering whether there could be something like Bigfoot out there. Fast forward to 2010 when we moved to Colorado, and particularly probably about 2012, we were trying to get the building that now houses the outpost in shape. It was built in 1878. Had been boarded up for years. And in Colorado, when you board anything up, you have deep winters and dry summers, and the plumbing and everything else takes a beating. So it took us a long time to get that building open. But during the months before we opened, there were two significant things that happened. One, my landlord at the time said to me, and I don't remember how we got on the topic of Bigfoot. And she said, well, there's someone in town here who's seen a Bigfoot. And she had seen it maybe a month before. So my interest got really piqued. And so I called her up, asked her to have coffee, and we sat down, and she was a manager of a local lodge, very credible. Nothing about her, I would say, got me concerned that maybe she was lying or anything else.
Yeah.
She told me her story, and it was a 2-person daytime sighting. She was with one of her best friends, and you get into, since that time I've heard hundreds and hundreds of stories, but when you have multi-person daytime sightings, it's real hard to say it's a mistaken identity. And so they both said that they both saw a Bigfoot. And about a month or two after that, Finding Bigfoot came to Bailey to do a Colorado episode. And she was a big reason why they came. There was another reason, which we can talk about later if you want, but I went to the town hall meeting, was on on TV, and met the cast. And there was 7 or 8 people that got up and talked about having seen a Bigfoot in or around Bailey out of 100, maybe 100 at the meeting. So 10% of the people stood up and told stories. And about that time, I told my wife, I think there's enough interest in Bigfoot. We should try something. She said, what? And I said, why don't we call the store the Bailey Country Store and Sasquatch Outpost? And we'll have a little back room and have a corner. We'll have some Bigfoot, souvenirs. And then she humored me. She wasn't a believer at the time, and she thankfully went along with me. But we put a big map of Colorado on the back wall and started, putting pins up when people came in with stories. And we're now on our second map, and that was long before we built the museum. And I think there's 370 or 380 pins on the map now.
Wow.
So it's so that's how the outpost got going, and we've never looked back.
So, obvious. I mean, it's one thing to make an outpost and, pick up on, something that people are, claiming they see, but, where did your real passion, how did that really start? Like, what really made you a believer? I mean, I know it had to be more than just hearing, a couple of people. The thing about myself is that, I always, out of all the cryptids out there in the world, the thing that really intrigued me the most about Sasquatch was the consistency of it. And, it would go back all the way from Native Americans and their tales about this creature. And you would even hear tales about, like, I think Leif Erikson apparently had some type of interaction with a hairy man, as they called it. It wasn't called Bigfoot back then.
Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett.
Yeah. I mean, there was a president, I forget his name.
Roosevelt.
The hunter, the big
Roosevelt?
hunter.
Oh, Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt allegedly had a Sasquatch encounter. Yeah.
He didn't himself, but he put a story in his book that a trapper told him.
Yes, you're right. That's exactly what it was. It was a hearsay type thing, but it was still intriguing. Like, there's so many dots about that, that's just been connected throughout the years, and you got a ton of cryptids out there. You got Chupacabra. I mean, that had like a good run in the 90s, and you had Loch Ness, but nothing has ever been as consistent as Sasquatch.
Correct.
What really solidified this creature for you to make you become as passionate about it as you are today?
When I talked to Kate, who was the first eyewitness I ever spoke to, I was convinced that she was telling the truth, that she had seen a Sasquatch. And so there was no question in my mind at that point that they were real. I already believed that they were real, but I'd never actually spoken to somebody who had seen one. And so her testimony was so credible, followed by hundreds of others. And my wife was actually convinced. She's had a sighting, but before she did, she was already convinced because of the hundreds of eyewitnesses that came into the outpost.
Just to the consistency of it.
Yeah, and they were cops, they were animal control officers, they were wildlife, rangers. I mean, these were people that had no reason to lie.
Yeah, and contrary to belief, there's not a lot of fame and glory for claiming that you saw a Bigfoot, and I would argue that the majority of people probably don't even mention it to anybody because of the stigma alone. Yeah. So you got to think the people that are actually coming to you're probably only hearing a fraction of it.
Well, they're pre-filtered by coming into our store. They filtered themselves as people who are interested in Sasquatch. I mean, we get a lot of critics and skeptics, but I would say the majority of people who come in are believers. So they kind of self-filter themselves. But, I would say here's something that I wish we could do is, and it probably will never happen, is to pool all the data from all the research organizations in this country. And there's hundreds of Sasquatch research organizations. I would, if I was a betting man, I would say the documented sightings are over 100,000.
Yeah.
So there's no other cryptid that even comes close to that.
No.
And you said the consistency is true. It's ironic in many ways that the BFRO, the largest data gathering organization, refuses to publish any sighting that has anything paranormal that has in the sighting. They will only publish flesh and blood sightings. So they probably have a third more than that than they've published that they just choose not to publish. But theirs is in the thousands, multi-thousands.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would say it's well over 100,000. And you're right. That's not counting all the people who won't say anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, and here's one of the, I mean, we're obviously, you know, the topic of this is the high strangeness aspect of Bigfoot. One of the really things that truly boggles my mind about the whole Bigfoot phenomenon is that it's a global thing.
Absolutely.
Is that you have Sasquatch type creatures that are all over the world, and the only place I think that there really isn't reports of a Bigfoot creature, maybe I'm wrong on this, is actually the continent of Africa. But
there are in Africa.
Really, that's intriguing. We might have to touch base on that. But you know, like Australia, you had the Yowie. And there's been some really amazing thermal footage that a couple of guys, a group out there, some Yowie researchers caught in Australia. That's really, really impressive, that they've got. And then you have like the Yeren in Asia. You have the rock ape in like Vietnam. You have
the Yeti in the Himalayas.
Yeti. What's the one in Russia? Yes. Russia has their own, and even there's like strange like Bigfoot reports in Great Britain, believe it or not. And that, to me, that's just like, I had a hard time believing that, but the more I kind of got into the Bigfoot thing, I'm like, you know what, you might as well be open-minded on this because it's just getting weirder.
And name any other cryptid that's worldwide.
Yeah, and I mean, what are your thoughts on the fact that there seems to be a worldwide at least sightings? I mean,
well, I mean, to me, it's just another verification that they're real. And, you know, there's, combine the 100,000 sightings in this country with the sightings around the world, and it's a worldwide phenomenon. And I am convinced beyond any reasonable doubt now that they shouldn't even be listed as a cryptid. They're an actual being. I believe they're people, and they're just a different kind of people than we are. But there is no reason to doubt anymore that they exist. The evidence is more than abundant, more than and I'm not just talking eyewitnesses. I'm talking physical evidence, audio evidence, DNA, photographs. There's nothing else that can even compare. And so we shouldn't call them a cryptid. Now, the fact that they're not in zoos tells you something about them. But, and if they were America's great ape, we'd have had them in zoos for the past 80 years. Trust me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, you know, when I first got into the Bigfoot thing, I used to think like people who thought that Bigfoot could teleport and disappear and was interdimensional. I used to think that they were lunatics. But I've now come to the idea that it's more crazier to think that we have a 8-foot, undiscovered ape species living in America that we can't catch. I mean, to me, that seems more ridiculous than the fact that these things could be interdimensional creatures. How did your evolution of thought on the Bigfoot thing, how has that progressed or changed? Or did you, in the Bigfoot world, there's two camps. You have like,
absolutely,
there's the camp where it's some type of undiscovered great ape that's more related to humans and other apes, and then there's the other camp where it's like, we got Bigfoot, some weird shit. And I'm definitely in the weird shit camp. But how did your personal evolution change over the years? Did you start out as a flesh and blood?
I did.
Great ape?
I did. And you could say there's actually 4 groups. The 2 you mentioned, the people who believe they're the Nephilim from the Bible,
True.
and people who believe they're 100% alien. So, and all four of those are kind of unique in their own ways. But the biggest separation is ape versus human, ape
Yeah.
versus the woo aspect, if you want to
Right.
use that. That's been used
Oh, yeah.
pejoratively for years. But so I'm actually writing a book right now. I'm going to call it the Bigfoot Anthology, but there's a local newspaper I've written articles to for the past 7 years, I think. And the articles really demonstrate the evolution of my thought about Sasquatch. And I did start off as flesh and blood, 100%. Although I wondered how we never caught one when
Right.
I believe they were
What-
flesh and blood.
One would ask that logically.
Yeah, I
And
think a
that's
lot of people
probably
struggle with that.
that's the most common question I get. The first question is after they go through the museum, they'll come out and they'll say, "Oh, so there's more than one." And I'm like, I don't even know how to answer that
You just
and not
don't.
and be respectful.
Yeah,
you know,
you
because
can't.
it's just like, did you take elementary school biology? Because you can't have one of anything
No.
that and still survive. But anyway, but the next question would be, why don't we find their bodies? Why don't we find their bones? It's a problematic question. I don't think it's without answers, but my thought evolved honestly just as a result of my research and the people who were researching Sasquatch with me and the things we were encountering, such as, and we could talk about any of these that you want to talk about, such as them disappearing in front of people's eyes, literally just pixelating and they're gone.
Right.
Or their tracks appearing in the middle of nowhere or disappearing in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
You can't explain that
You
in
really
the flesh
can't.
and blood. The aspect of mind speak, the aspect of healing. I know multiple stories, firsthand stories of them healing people, sometimes of terminal illnesses. Their eyes glowing in the dark, them being able to generate light out of their eyes. Just go on. And they're, I'm honestly convinced that their intelligence surpasses ours. So we're not talking an ape. Gorillas have intelligence, there's no question, but is it a human intelligence? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I don't think, in my opinion, there's no question that their intelligence rivals ours or surpasses ours.
Right. I think it's like I agree with you. I think it's almost like on a different spectrum. I don't think it's like they're out there building MacBooks or anything like that, but
it's a different type of intelligence.
It really is. It's almost like a flip-flop of the human mindset. Like, I think that they have some deep knowledge or awareness that's just unique into themselves.
And you could put it this way, and I have been formulating for days some things that I want to put together some thoughts on this topic. But the fact that they live in the woods, hidden from humans by and large, show themselves occasionally to humans, but they're not building MacBooks, they're not building houses, they don't drive cars. There's something about them that, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but in some ways I think they're so far beyond us, they don't need the things that we use and have. And they're living and existing on a different level than we are.
I agree. I like the way you put that. I tend to agree with that.
When they're here, I mean, I think they move in and out of our dimension, if you want to use that term. But I think it's possible. I think there's evidence that would point to the fact that they're normal mode of existence is invisible to us, and they have to make themselves visible when they want to be seen.
Yeah, that was about it. That actually answers the question I was about to ask you. Is like, how do you think they are able to hide themselves so well, and then also kind of conceal? But you're kind of thinking it's more of like a dimensional.
Well, I mean, they're very
phase.
good at hiding, even when they're
Yeah,
present in the physical. They're extremely, you know, they can stand still in the woods.
yeah,
I don't know if you guys have ever tried this. Sometime when you're out in the woods near a popular trail that's heavily wooded, step off the trail. If there's a way you can get uphill, maybe 10 yards, and just sit down and see how many people walking on that trail see you.
Yeah.
And they'll
Oh, yeah.
walk right by you. They'll even glance in your direction, and they will not see you, let alone when you are hairy and you blend in. All the more reason why, even if they can't do the multidimensional thing, interdimensional thing, we just are not observant when we're in the woods. We just aren't. We're looking down at the trail, you know, and so they could stand there watching people all day long, and we would never notice them.
Well, speaking of that, oh, go ahead, Christian.
I was just gonna ask, have y'all seen the recent footage of the people on the lift going up the mountain? And there's like
No.
they claim they saw this bit. I mean, it looks pretty. I mean, it's like remarkable footage, like the quality of it.
Is it summer or winter?
I mean, I don't know. The grass on the mountain kind of looks yellow.
Wait a minute. You're not talking about on when they're on a train, are you?
I don't know. They're on something taking them by.
There's a train.
And it squats down.
Yeah, that's a fake.
Yeah, that one's a fake.
Really?
Little birdie told me that was more than likely fake.
I could show you if I could pull it up. I could show you a blown up picture of him sitting on the ground. He's got sunglasses on. So
yeah. Don't they run like a Sasquatch themed tours or something like that?
I think it was a promotion.
Oh man,
of some kind.
Sorry, Christian.
Yeah, I got calls from.
I just saw it. And I was like,
that thing went global, man. That went viral.
It was on TMZ. I mean, you know, but
unfortunately, what that does is it causes the skeptics to say,
"Of course,
see, now they're all like that. They're all fake like that." You know.
Yeah. Well, you know, with the thing of like, we obviously there's a lot of Bigfoot podcasts and stuff like that, but we were talking about consistencies earlier and things that you hear, you know, luckily with these podcasts, you get to hear a lot of people's stories about what they're seeing, and the consistency of what I hear is really what kind of solidifies the existence of these creatures for me. But if you don't mind, talk about some of the consistencies. I'm talking about behavioral attributes that you commonly hear, whether it's people telling you things that you're hearing in the Bigfoot world, whether it's on podcasts like this, but talk about some of the consistencies of how this creature tends to operate and function, whether it's vocals, whether it's movement, swaying, etc. Just kind of deep dive into what you know about what seems to be consistent about them.
Well, the sightings are consistent, and my own experience is consistent with that. So there's many things. One is the sightings are usually brief. They will show themselves and then they'll take off, disappear, run, or just disappear. But people see them for a matter of seconds. I've got firsthand stories of people who've sat face to face across from them 3 feet away for 7 or 8 minutes, but that's the exception. That's not the rule. So brief encounters is consistent. Nonviolent encounters is consistent. Now there are the stories out there of violence upon humans from Sasquatch, but the vast majority of stories are calm, and you know, people, it's so funny, you'll look on YouTube, and I hate this drives me nuts. The title of the YouTube will say terrifying encounter with Sasquatch, or Sasquatch pursued me, and then you watch it and
That's
nothing like that happened.
Yeah, but say
clickbait, click title.
It's clickbait, and
algorithm.
and if they did see one, that's all that happened. They saw it. It terrified them. The Sasquatch didn't do anything, didn't approach them, didn't act aggressive towards them. You could the case could be made that if violence is exercised upon humans, they don't live to tell the tale, so we would never know. They could just be among Polites disappearances. But and I tell people, all the years I've been doing this, I've taken hundreds, maybe more than that, hundreds of people into the woods at night, overnight, have never had an issue. Been scared, yes, many, many times, but that was my own issue. And all the researchers I know across the country combined, we've taken thousands of people, and not one has ever disappeared or been assaulted. So that's a very consistent theme, is kind of the peaceful nature of the sightings. Now, my research partner just sent me a video of supposedly a Bigfoot shaking a mobile home and growling as it did so. Yeah, those kinds of things happen. But trust me, if a Sasquatch wants to get into your trailer, it's going to get in the trailer.
Right.
So that's the fact that they shake it and don't come in when, what's a door on a trailer? I mean, I could get in. I could kick a door in on a trailer, let alone.
I think they could rip a trailer and wide open if they wanted to.
But they don't. They don't come through your tent or into your tent. I've had them around my tent. I don't even know how many times now, and pushing on the tent and letting me know they're there. What's a tent? It's a filament. It's a flimsy filament of nylon that they would have absolutely no issue ripping apart if they wanted to. They just don't do that. And so that's a consistency. Generally, they're quiet, although they do vocalize, and their vocalizations tend to range between, the most common vocalizations people hear are whoops or yells. If you want to call a tree knock a vocalization, and in my opinion, it could be a vocalization. I can't imagine Sasquatch walking around with a stick wanting to hit on trees. So I think they have some way to do that doesn't involve actually wood.
You're talking about the wood knocks or alleged wood knocks? Yeah, I've heard different ideas about that. Like it's some kind of like lip pop or
something, because it happens so fast. I've had it happen 3 seconds after I would hit a tree. I would get a response, massive response.
Yeah,
I mean, it sounds like a tree hitting a tree, not a stick. And they're not walking around holding a stick waiting for somebody to do that. It's just that's foolishness.
Yeah, I've always kind of pondered that too.
Yeah.
So what do you think their like purpose like of interacting with us is, or like even you're saying they can kind of phase in and out? Like what's the point of even coming to this realm?
I think they have an affinity for us because they're like us. They are a version of us in some ways. Some of the DNA evidence points to a human hybrid. Other DNA evidence, a book that I'm writing a forward to that's about to come out, would say their DNA is 100% human. But they are interested in us. I think, maybe it's as simple as when they're in the woods and we show up and we're camping, we're the only show in town, so might as well come and check it out. And but I've had many people that I've taken out want to sit by the fire until they come into camp. I'm like, you honestly think they're just going to walk into camp while you're sitting by the fire? Get in your tent and they'll come in the camp.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an agreement. It's an unspoken agreement. You guys get in your tents. we'll come into your camp and mess with you. But if you're all sitting by the fire, it's not going to happen. We'll vocalize, we'll throw stuff at you, but we're never going to come walking into the camp. So
yeah, because it's almost like anybody who's looking for them doesn't really, the chances of you actually seeing that, it's not really going to happen. It always seems to be people who are not looking for these creatures are the ones that usually have these encounters. I think if you're out running around the woods, especially, you know, they can obviously tell if you're up to no good. If you're a pack of men or people are out in the woods with rifles and weird, you know, weird technology hanging off of them, you're obviously going to be a red flag to them. I think like what you said, like being in a tent where they feel comfortable, I think they would be more capable or willing to come in and interact with people if the people are not showing any signs of any type of awareness or interest.
Well, and I'm completely convinced that campers who are not Bigfoot believers, campers, hikers, hunters, bikers, are encountering Sasquatch all the time. They just don't know it.
Yeah.
Campers will believe it's a bear outside, or instead of a Sasquatch, or even though they can wake up and find these giant barefoot tracks around their camp, you know. And so I know it happens. It has to happen. Researchers can't be the only ones having these kind of experiences. I think people who are just out hunting and camping have it happen. They don't describe it as a Sasquatch because they don't know that. They don't understand that.
Yeah.
But if they knew what to listen for and what to look for, they would know that they were around anyway. But there was something else consistent that I was just thinking about.
While you're thinking about that, I wanted to toss something at you. Have you ever listened to any of Sasquatch Ontario's work?
I have.
Some of his vocals. And when I first heard that, I wasn't really buying it because it was the first time I ever really heard vocals, and I was pretty skeptical. But then I started hearing other people capturing these vocals that were very similar and very Sierra soundish sounds type vocals. But his vocals, once I started hearing other people that were capturing like similar, there's another, oh God, he goes by Green Wave on YouTube, but he's really RK Davis. What's his?
MK Davis.
MK Davis. Yeah. Sorry, MK. MK Davis has done some amazing work, but there's a couple of videos that he's had or someone's given him that has that same like deep vocals, such as what Sasquatch Ontario has caught. What are your thoughts on that evidence?
I had the same hesitations about them. Do you know who Scott Nelson is?
The name sounds familiar.
So Scott Nelson was the one who analyzed the Sierra sounds and determined that it was a language.
Oh, he's the
Navy cryptolinguist.
Yeah, the Navy guy.
So wait, explain that. What happened?
Can you kind of give into that story a little bit for somebody who doesn't know?
Ron recorded. You're familiar with the Sierra sounds, I'm assuming.
Yes, I am.
Christian's
not.
Okay,
I'm a newbie.
He's a noob.
So you'll have to. But you just Google Sierra sounds, and
I'll send it to you later on. Trust me,
free. You can listen to them. But to date, the Sierra sounds, in my opinion, are the vocal equivalent of the Patterson-Gimlin recording.
Yep.
There's nothing else that's been recorded that is as extensive, lasted as long. I think they had 90 minutes of recorded.
And it's wild. I mean, it is. It is nothing. I don't think a human being could ever make those noises.
And they recorded this. They were an 8-hour horse ride into the Sierra Nevadas. Okay,
deep.
Nobody knew where this camp was.
So deep in the Sierras.
Hunting camp.
And this was what, late 60s, early
like the early 70s.
Okay.
So they recorded them. They had them analyzed. They were determined not to have been tampered with.
Yeah, they were out of like vocal range.
Outside of the human range.
Yeah.
But Ron waited 35 years to meet someone like Scott. Now, Scott is a Navy cryptolinguist, so he was trained to analyze unknown languages. And He speaks multiple languages anyway, but he heard these recordings, and as he was listening, he said to his son, and Scott's a good friend, and he told his son, Steve, that's a language. These things are speaking a language. And he got a hold of Ron. It took him a long time to get a hold of Ron Moorhead. And so Ron, they went on, I think they went up to the site 10 times together. Never got the same vocalizations that Ron and his hunting companions did, but Ron gave him all the recordings. Scott analyzed them, and he said 100% this is a language. It has syntax, it has everything that our language has, our human languages.
Right.
In inflection, questions go up, negations go down. And so he came up with the Sasquatch phonetic alphabet. So Scott, who's infinitely better qualified than I am to analyze somebody's vocalizations, he listened to Sasquatch Ontario and he said, if that's a Sasquatch, he's drunk or he's high, you know. And
Hell yeah.
and the guy didn't appreciate that at all.
I'm sure he didn't.
But you know, so is he faking it? I don't know if he's faking it, but you know, it's like some of Todd Standing's video stuff. If they're faking it, they're taking an enormous risk. But when you have one person that has far more evidence than anyone else has been able to get in 40 years of Sasquatch research,
I can name quite a few of those people.
It does make you wonder. I mean,
little red flag, huh?
Yeah, red flag. So anyway, I can't say one way or the other, and I certainly wouldn't criticize them, but the vocals are bizarre compared to the vast majority of vocals that I've heard. And although Scott has confirmed that Sasquatch vocalizes on the exhale and on the inhale both.
It's almost like I've heard people talking about where they think they have like two sets of vocal cords, because you would hear people one of the things that kind of shook me, like when they would talk about some of the screams from this creature, is that they said it would be a roar and a deep lion-like roar and a high-pitched scream at the same time. And it would everybody's always like, I don't know how it could generate that noise, because it sounded like it was producing two noises at once.
Well, and they speak far more quickly than we do. Their language is very fast, but it's because they're speaking on the exhale and the inhale both. So it'd be like me going and like talking like this and then talking like this, but they have this ability to.
Happy birthday! Some balloons
funny.
just popped up.
I think it's because I inhaled on the vocals.
Yeah,
but
that's funny.
I've never seen that happen.
That was awesome.
So that allows them to speak twice as fast as we do, and so but there's some consistencies in the vocals that you get, and Scott's listened to hundreds of vocals, and many of them he would say, yeah, that sounds like a Sasquatch. Of course, he's judging it off kind of the gold standard, if you will, of the Sierra sounds.
Yeah.
And who knows whether Sasquatch in Nepal speaks the same language as Sasquatch here or in China or wherever.
Like different species or
different. Well,
cultures.
It's like, we speak different languages as humans. Even you get a human from lower Mississippi and someone from Vermont and try and have a conversation. And they're gonna be looking at each other like, I don't understand a word you're saying.
Especially from Augusta, Georgia, from where Christian's from. Barely understand them.
But they're speaking the same language. It's not even a different language. Or British English versus Southern American, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, my point is, it's very probable to me that they speak different dialects in different locations. And so it's not necessarily true that every Sasquatch could understand every other Sasquatch, just like we can't understand each other.
What would?
Oh,
Oh, go ahead, Christian.
do you believe that they're like solitary creatures?
No,
Or
they live in family groups, usually an adult male and female that, based on evidence from habituation situations, seem to mate for life like we do and have multiple offspring, and those offspring will go off and find a mate, of their own. But yeah, so they live in family groups, and if you see one, they're never by themselves. Now, you may only see one, but if there's a family group there, there's going to be a sentinel adult male, probably. Could be female, I guess, but a sentinel that is going to be there kind of. I mean, we've had sightings around here where the Sasquatch was standing right in the middle of the trail, not even attempting to hide, just standing in the middle of the trail. And, very clearly, the guy that saw it obviously didn't want to approach it, but it was very clear nonverbal communication. You're not coming any farther up this trail. And makes me think there was maybe behind there some other Sasquatch that it was protecting or whatever. And at night, I've had situations where I've seen with people I've taken out, I've seen 15 to 17 Sasquatch at one time.
What?
From their eyes glowing in the dark. And one of them came about halfway between, and all we could ever see was their eyes, nothing else. But
what real quick, what color was the eye shine? Because you hear like a variance of eye shine when it comes to Bigfoot.
Yeah.
But what color were you seeing?
I've seen white, yellow, and red. And in the same group, I've seen those three colors. And so, but one came between the others and where we were sitting, didn't come any further than halfway, but it stopped there. And I'm convinced it was a sentinel that was making sure we didn't go any closer to the others that were back behind it. But yeah, we had I counted, I think, 15. One of the other guys in the group said he counted 17 sets of eyes. And
it's pretty intimidating.
And this was pitch black. I mean, we could see him with our naked eye.
Yeah.
In the pitch black. So I know they live in family groups based on those kinds of. I've almost never seen only one set of eyes. It's almost always 2, 3, or more.
Yeah.
Very rarely just one.
What kind of DNA are people finding of these? Just hair or blood as well?
Everything: hair, blood, saliva, tissue occasionally. But yeah, and there's great controversy about the various DNA results that are coming out.
Yeah.
I'm sure in the coming couple of years we're going to get even more specific DNA. The book I'm writing a forward to, the lab that did the DNA analysis did not want to be known, which surprised me. I thought we were beyond that now, but
no,
I guess they still don't want their names out there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what the Dr. Melba Ketchum. I mean, I hope I'm not butchering her last name, but I know the hell she went through. I mean, she was a respectable geneticist. And when she started, she wasn't even like a Bigfoot person, but she got connected to the Bigfoot world. I guess people were presenting DNA to her, and she caught a lot of flack for even delving into it. It's the scientific world is, people don't realize that the scientific world lives in a box to a degree. And if you stray off course and start delving into things that will contradict, modern science and known science, it won't really work out too well in your favor. There's a huge stigma.
Well, and to answer that question, Christian, in that study, in the Ketchum study, which is, again, very controversial, but it seemed to indicate you get your DNA from the mitochondrial DNA or the nuclear DNA. when you send in 23andMe, whatever, they're only doing the mitochondrial. They're not doing nuclear. Nuclear for one sample costs $3,000 to $4,000 to have analyzed.
Yeah.
And so, but the mitochondrial shows the mother's side, the nuclear shows the father's side. In some of these samples of even blood, the mother's side was human, the father's side, the nuclear, was unknown. It was
Unknown.
nowhere in the genetic database.
Whoa.
Yeah. I've heard that too.
You know, what is it? Who knows?
So if they bleed, that means we can kill them, right?
They've been killed. I know they've been killed.
Oh,
They've been
really?
shot.
Yeah.
I've heard stories that I believe of them being shot and bleeding, but still getting up and walking away.
I think there's been bodies recovered too. I mean, with that being said, you know, I believe that there have been bodies recovered, and with that, obviously, that's never been known or brought to light. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there is some type of cover up, like do you believe that the government is aware these creatures exist?
I was about to ask that. Literally,
they have to be, and so that's my first part of that answer is they have to be, and because of the resources they have at their disposal. The second part of that answer is because they do, and because it's unknown, that's never been made public, then it's a cover up. I have in my museum, I have a photograph of from a very large national forest office in the Pacific Northwest, a Bigfoot sighting report that somebody took a picture of on a desk, and it has the watermark of that particular, I think it's their wildland fire team, Bigfoot sighting report. Says on the top of the report, so they took a picture of the front page, they opened it up, they took another picture, and at the very top it says, don't bother submitting fake reports or joke reports because they will not be entered in the database. So they have a database. It's a National Forest Office. Many questions in there about the environment, who was with them, what did they see? Why isn't that public knowledge? You know, if they have a questionnaire that people are filling out, how long can people keep a secret? That's my question.
I heard there's now. I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that the Army had a field manual at one point in time that actually had Bigfoot identification, like this area is a known Sasquatch area, and I think it was like back in like the late 60s or early 70s, something like that. Yeah. Clearly not anymore, and there's so many reports that military people have seen on training ranges a lot. I mean, I hear a lot of reports where guys will be picking these creatures up on night optics, whether it's thermal, night vision, and they'll see, like, even there was a really cool report that I heard one time where some guys were up in like Washington or something like that, where they were fighting in the they were doing training in the Bradleys. Bradley fighting vehicles, and apparently they were picking up these heat signatures in the woods of a large, what looked like a man, observing them. And this is a training range where they were doing live fire or getting ready to, and they were kind of freaked out. They're like, is there some dude hanging out on our training range, like watching us? And I've heard stories like that so many times, and you know, I don't have any reason to believe, you know, they're bullshitting or lying about it. I mean, I just think it's really interesting, but you hear a lot of consistent reports about that.
You do, and many reports of the military encountering them or hunting them down, or
I've heard that,
whatever. And even I've heard stories about units that weren't told what they were going to be hunting, but they were given these rabies shots and stuff before they went out. So it's like, okay, you know, a lot of that's got to be bullshit, but still, there's so many stories, they can't all be fake. And so, you know, again, my question is, for how long can massive parts of this country, population-wise, keep a secret? And so it's got to come out. You know, the UFO thing is now public knowledge, although they're still not saying that they've had extraterrestrials in captivity, like from Roswell, and I have testimonies of people whose father was there and saw one of the extraterrestrials wounded.
Wow.
So, you know, and I have no doubt that our government has probably a Sasquatch or multiple ones in alive and probably dead bodies.
Yeah.
If they're tracking them in national forest offices and that's not public knowledge, you know, and what would be their motive for not making that public?
Yeah.
Money, probably, because if people become afraid and stop going to national parks and stop going into the national forest, it's a huge hit for the government financially. So, you know, it always comes back to money sooner or
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah. With your research, I mean, you obviously you go out in the field. Like, how do you conduct your research and can you don't mind, do you mind like diving into some of the interesting aspects of what you've experienced in the field? I mean, I know you touched base on it a
Sure.
little bit, but
Well, we do. My last podcast last Tuesday, I had my former and current research partners, and we've done extensive gifting with Sasquatch and had unbelievable interaction with them at gifting sites. So that's one thing we've done to try. It's a way to communicate non-verbally. And in my former research partner's case, they actually one of them showed itself to him near one of our gifting sites after probably doing this for 2 years. I think they finally got to the point where they trusted us enough that one of them showed itself to us, to him.
what are you actually gifting? How does that
we've
work?
we've tried everything, from food, which we don't recommend anyone do because there's stories of people who put food out regularly and then for whatever
Yeah.
reason stopped doing it
And they got pissed.
and they got pissed.
Hmm.
But we've tried everything, but consistently, and this is just what we chose to do, we would put, so we had access to a lot of deer antlers, and we would cut off the ends of the antlers, just the sharp ends, the tines, and we would put those out there. They took about 100 of those from us. I don't know what they do with them. I've made necklaces out of deer tines and leather, you know, stringing them on leather. They'll take those. And we tried putting different objects to see how they were interested in it. We would put a lot of different little plastic animals and things. Many of them they never bother with, but horses, they took almost every time. And then a year, 2 years later, bring them back.
Wow.
And it's funny. One time we put a plastic toy dog and they threw it on the ground next to the gifting site. Very often we would put rocks of different colors and things, and we tried all kinds of things, but they would always interact. But sometimes we would, because we always would put our gifts out there, take a picture or a video, come back, take a picture or a video before we touch anything, and then compare those. And we would think, no, they haven't been here. And then we would realize every object was rotated 90 degrees, or half of them were turned over.
Yeah.
And it's
like
subtleties.
It's like a little mind game.
Yeah, it's subtleties that, you know, a bear, a raccoon, a squirrel's never going to do something like that.
Yeah.
It was intelligence. And so they would interact like that. Occasionally they left things for us. Like one time we put a little toy cow, like a Playmobil cow that had an articulating neck, but the rest of the body was stable. And right where the neck joined the body, they stuck a blue jay feather, you know, shaft in there with the blue jay feather sticking up. Things like that. We never had them leave us anything really significant, but, you know, they left us things like that to let us know that they were there. But so we would try lots of things, and it's interesting. And lately, the last year, I've been going out with a different research partner, and they haven't been interacting with us a lot. And I think a lot of it has to do with the consistency that my first research partner and I had over about 3 years, where we were out every week. We tried to wear the same clothes when we went out and do the same things when we got to the gifting site. And I think the result was they interacted a lot with us. But my current research partner and I haven't been that consistent. And I think they're not interacting. And so
are you focusing on the same area? And is this Colorado or?
Yeah, it's Colorado, and it's a place that's about 15 minutes from my house. So it's very convenient.
That is convenient.
And that's how close they're right here. And so, but we've a big part of my research individually is gifting, but I take a lot of people out in the summertime, lots of people on night hikes, overnights. I do overnight camping trips. I do overnight horseback camping trips.
That's cool.
And we've had, so every one of those trips is research for me. Things that will happen, we make a note of when we're with other people. They braid horses' manes. They let horses off the tether at night, and we have to go get the horse and bring them back. And they'll do that multiple times with different horse each time.
So strange.
They don't hurt the horses. They just let them off and untie them, and the horses don't react. And so, so a lot of my research on my personal end is just gifting and just being in the woods. But I take a lot of people out because this is my full-time gig, so, and I have great fun doing it. I mean, it's a blast.
I know go ahead. Go ahead. No, sorry, I've been interrupting you all night.
No, you go ahead.
Do you think there's any like connection between them and everything that's been going on with like UFOs and that whole?
I do. I think there's a connection. There's an obvious connection between Sasquatch and orbs. We've seen orbs and Sasquatch at the same time or near each other.
Yeah.
So it's not a big step for me to believe that there's a connection between Sasquatch and UFOs.
Yeah.
So do they come from the UFOs or not? I don't know, but there's a connection there that I can't deny. And so many stories of people seeing a Sasquatch and then seeing a UFO or vice versa.
Yeah.
Within the same area, close to the same time. So I've never seen a UFO in conjunction with the Sasquatch, but we've seen orbs in the woods in conjunction with them. So
I've experienced an orb one time in my life, and it was a wild night to say the least. Haven't seen any since, but it was pretty wild. And
well, if you're out in the woods, try this, because I've had some success doing this. Just being out in an area where potentially there's Sasquatch, and just take my iPhone and just start taking flash pictures around me in the dark. And it's amazing the lights that will show up in those pictures that I don't see with my naked eye. And so lights or other stuff that's makes you wonder how much is going on around us that we don't even know about most of the time when we're in the woods.
You just can't even see. I mean, the human eye can only see in certain spectrums, and there's there's a thing I've been hearing about called the shadow biome. That I don't really know a whole lot about it, because there's Gary Nolan, who's a I forget what
I know that name, but I don't know.
He's very prominent. He's in the academia world, and he's a scientist, and I think he's a Nobel. I think he's been nominated for a Nobel Prize, but he's deep in the UFO world, and he's one of the big names that are giving credibility to it as far as research goes. But he's talked about the shadow biome that he's been looking into, and that it's a whole basically parallel realm that is just, we're just not aware it's there. I don't really know how to explain it, but I hope to
Shadow
learn more
biome.
about that. But it's,
Okay.
yeah, you could look it up. It's shadow biome.
So it's
And
like a different dimension or something? Or
I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it. But there's a guy that he mentioned on a podcast that apparently had a very technical camera, and he was able to photograph or get video of some extremely well, the way Gary was very blunt about it. He said it was proof of life
interesting.
in this. I don't know if it's a spectrum that we can't see.
Okay.
Like, have you ever heard of like rods where
Oh yeah,
there's
flying
these,
rods.
yeah, you see them on, people capture them on camera, but they're not insects or bugs or anything like that. It's just, it looks like an organism that
It's
is
got
just,
like wings down the sides.
yeah.
Of it. Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody's if you've never heard of rods, look it up on YouTube, and there's a ton of footage on them, but you can't see them with the human eye.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I have cameras inside my store and museum and outside, and I have one camera in the back room where I have my animatronic Sasquatch. And if I turn on the motion sensor at night, it'll come on all night long, and very often it's coming on because there's these perfectly round little orbs floating
Yeah.
around in the room.
Yeah.
I can't see them with my eyes, but I can take my iPhone and catch one on the iPhone and follow it around the room. I can't see it, but I can see it through the iPhone.
Wow.
Explain that to me.
Yeah. And speaking of that, like, obviously, people have been trying to use game cameras to capture evidence
I was gonna mention
yeah,
that
right.
earlier. That's another
Talk,
consistency about Sasquatch.
talk about that. I mean, it's funny because for anybody out there listening, if you have a Sasquatch problem and you want to get rid of them, just buy yourself a game camera and
Absolutely.
put it on your property, and I swear to God, they'll disappear. But what have
Yeah.
you heard? Like, what are your theories on why it's so hard? And I do believe people have caught Sasquatch on game cameras, because there's some really unique photos out there
But not very
that,
often.
that I think are pretty legit.
Yeah.
But talk about game cameras and Sasquatch.
We've never caught them on game cameras. In fact, when we were doing gifting, if we put a camera out, all the gifting stopped.
Yeah.
And we take the camera away, and it took a little while, and then it would start up again. So, yeah, people who are afraid, who are camping or whatever, buy a game camera, point it right at your tent, and you'll sleep during the night, because they're never going to get in front of that camera ever. And so they either see in the infrared spectrum,
That's what I think.
or they just know what a camera is. I can put audio recorders out all night long. They don't care. They'll walk around. I can hear them walking. I can hear them vocalizing. It's a little electronic, thing with red blinking lights. If you didn't know the difference, you'd think it was a camera. They know the difference because they don't care about audio recorders. But you put a camera out. I've had more than one camera taken. I never see it again. Or they will knock over. If it's on a chair, they'll knock the chair over. If it's on a tree, they'll turn it around the other side of the tree, or they just won't go in front of it. And so I've had lifelong researchers tell people I know, hey, you have Sasquatch coming to your house? Well, put some cameras on your deck and put some apples out on the railing, and then you'll get some footage of them. I'm like, you've been doing this how long?
Yeah, right.
And you think they're going to get a Sasquatch walking up and picking up an apple? If it was that easy, we'd have thousands of pictures of them.
Yeah.
Thousands. But they won't come. They will not come in front of that camera. They may come behind it and make noises and stuff, but it's just amazing how skilled they are at not being filmed.
I think they my theory is they see the IR light, and I believe that other animals, it's not just unique to Sasquatch.
No,
because
I think they do too.
There's plenty of footage out there I've seen of like elk and moose and
looking
deer,
straight at the camera,
and they're staring right at that camera. And it's not just like the flash, because sometimes it's just video. but and they're looking right at that
right at the
camera.
lens. Yeah.
And I'm like, they're aware that thing's there. It's some type of subtle noise, which I don't really think that's really it. I think that they can just see that light. And I
I've
think
got a. Go ahead, finish your thought.
I think with Sasquatch, they can probably see the perimeter of that light, and they're able to navigate right around that and know exactly, like, that's weird. Like, what is that? I mean, if you were out in the woods and you saw some strange light out there, I don't know if I would step into that, being like, well, who the hell's light is that, and what are they doing with that?
I have a friend who spent a month in the woods up in Minnesota this last summer. He had 24 cameras out in the woods, around the camp, in the woods, facing the camp, in the camp, facing different directions. Not once got a Sasquatch on any camera, but when the battery died and they all turned off, they came in the camp and they were messing with his tent and everything. One time or twice he got their eye shine, and that was it, but never anything else. I mean, over a whole month, 24 cameras, you'd think, okay, if anyone's ever going to catch a Sasquatch, and it was an area that there was a lot of activity, nothing.
Yeah. We got a few minutes left. I did wanted to touch base with you. It's not to pivot off Bigfoot, but do you follow any type of other cryptid stuff like Dogman? That's something that's at first I thought that was ridiculous too, but man, there's so many consistent stories about that. And not only that, but historically speaking, I mean, when we say Dogman, it's no different than a modern day werewolf.
Yeah.
And those reports have been pretty consistent over the years and throughout history, really. But what are your thoughts on that?
Of any other cryptid, I would say Dogman's the only one, just because people who are seeing Sasquatch are seeing Dogmen, or the same kind of people. I don't get a lot of reports about that. Personally, I would love to meet a Sasquatch up close. I've had sightings, but at a distance. I don't want to meet a Dogman at a distance or up close. And
there's nothing cuddly about Dogman from what I hear.
Those encounters are more often than not frightening and
super
tending
scary
towards violence versus what a Sasquatch might be.
Maybe even demonic.
Maybe, but it's strange because they're described as an upright canine with dog feet, but human hands with claws.
Yeah, like raccoon type hands.
They don't have
describe
claws, they have hands. Yeah, like raccoon hands. And so, and a very canid nose, ears upright,
Yeah.
So they're scary.
Well, if people want to learn more about you and Sasquatch Outpost, man, where should they go?
Well, they can watch our weekly live podcasts at Sasquatch Outpost podcasts on YouTube and Facebook. SasquatchOutpost.com is our website, and there you can find a lot of information about what we're doing and things we're doing in the summertime. If somebody wants to get involved or take part in something, I started a separate company called Rabbit Hole Adventures that I do most of the outdoor stuff through. But you can get that through the SasquatchOutpost.com website as well.
Christian, cool. I think we need to come out to Jim over in Colorado.
100%.
And hang out
in the woods.
Let's do the horseback camping.
To go to the state,
Yeah.
Where are you guys?
I'm in Florida.
Yeah, and I'm in Georgia.
Georgia, okay.
Yeah, I would love to go. I mean, I have a friend that lives in Colorado, and all the pictures look so beautiful. Like, are you kind of on more like, I don't really know Colorado that well, or is it more mountainous where you're at, or are there different kind of
describe your area?
I'm in the foothills. I live at 8,500 feet, and we're about 45 minutes outside Denver. So not very far. I mean, you can get to us easily, and there's stuff going on right around us. You don't have to drive an hour and a half to find anything.
Colorado's a hot spot for sure.
It is.
Yeah, me and Mike have been talking about doing like some kind of crazy road trip or something.
Yeah.
So.
Sure. Well, I love Utah. I mean, Utah and Arizona is my spot, man. I just got back from Moab not too long ago, and I fell in love with that place. And that's not too far from Colorado, right across the street.
It's not.
Well, all right. We may have to plan a trip out there and do a podcast out there, Christian.
Yeah, that'd be super fun.
You bet.
Well, Jim, it's been an honor and a pleasure having you on, my friend. Hope to have you back on in the future sometime. And you've been on, just real quick, you've been you made quite a name for yourself in this field. You've been on a lot of documentaries. If people wanted to see you on camera, what are some of the documentaries that you've been on?
Let's see.
You mentioned one of my favorite, the
Sasquatch, the Bigfoot
alien
connection revealed.
Yeah, that one's really good. The title, I almost didn't watch it because the title was kind of corny, but man, that was a good documentary.
Chasing Bigfoot: The Quest for Truth. A recent one is the Bailey of Bigfoot and its portal. That's gotten multiple hundreds of thousands of views. Ancient Monster Quest on History Channel. I'm several. One that Alex Petikoff did with us as part of his series with Small Town Monsters. He did an episode in Colorado. So yeah, there's quite a few out there. Some that I forget because they were done 10 years ago. So
yeah, what he's saying is he's kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
there you go.
He's kind of a big deal.
Without saying it.
Alex Petikoff is a good buddy of ours, and we're going to get him into the woo camp one of these days. But you know what? God bless him because he's such a good Bigfoot researcher because he's so level-headed, and you're never going to see any shenanigans on the Small Town Monsters content. That's one thing I love about those guys. Is that they're not, what was that? That was Bigfoot. Every little crack and noise they hear. They're just they're down to earth and they're true pros at it. And so is Jim. Yep. So check out Jim's work. And again, Jim, thank you so much for joining us, man. We look forward to hopefully having you in the future sometime, and hopefully you get some good evidence, to get a picture or something that you can share with the world, and that'd be awesome, man.
Sure would love to do that. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us tonight. We appreciate you listening, and we'll see you here next time.
Yeah. See you.